In 1948, in a rented room in Los Angeles, a man spent 5 nights teaching about 200 people something that most of them had never been taught in their lives. Not how to ask for what they wanted, how to stop. Now, let me tell you what this is not. This is not a conspiracy video. I'm not a Neville Goddard historian, and I'm not here to defend the metaphysics or sell you a manifestation technique. I'm not going to tell you the universe is listening, because I don't think it is. I'm interested in something I think is much more useful than any of that. Because here what I keep coming back to. The material from those 5 nights was never banned. Nobody hid it. It was printed as a little booklet handed to the people in the room and just left in a drawer for 50 years while easier books went into shop windows. And when you actually read it, you understand why. It doesn't tell you how to get things. It takes apart the one thing you've been doing quietly under everything for your entire adult life. You've been asking quietly for your entire life, so let's get into it.
Chapter 1. The Fifth Night, Los Angeles, 1948. A rented room above a street that has not yet decided what it wants to be. There are folding chairs. Not enough of them. The overhead bulbs are too warm for the season, and nobody has opened a window. So the room holds the smell of cigarette smoke and mimeograph ink, and the faint chemical sweetness of the duplicating fluid they use to run off the pages that are sitting right now in the laps of about 200 people. It is the fifth night. They have come back 4 nights in a row. That is the part worth sitting with. This was not a lecture anyone was compelled to attend, in a city that had just finished a war and was busy selling itself a future on installment. Every one of these people had somewhere else to be. They came back anyway. The man at the front is not wearing robes. He has no title, no institution behind him, no letters after his name. He is a former dancer from Barbados who walked away from the stage 16 years earlier. And when he speaks, the accent is still there under the vowels. He is not going to tell them how to ask for anything. That is the thing. In a room of 200 people who have each arrived carrying something they want, on a street where every second building is promising to help them get it, the man at the front is about to spend the evening dismantling the act of wanting itself. Now come forward. It is 11 at night, and you are sitting in a parked car outside your own house. The engine is off. You can hear it ticking as it cools, that small, irregular metal sound. And you are not getting out yet. And you could not explain to anyone why. The house is fine. The people inside it are fine. Nothing has happened. You are just sitting there with your hands still on the wheel, and underneath everything. Underneath the day, underneath the tiredness, underneath the list of things you did not do. There is a sound running that has been running for years. You are asking, not out loud. You gave up on out loud a long time ago. But it is there in the way you scan your bank balance before you have decided to. It is there in the half sentence you start in the shower and abandon. It is there when you lie down and your mind produces, unbidden, a small, hopeful negotiation with nobody in particular. Let it be all right. Let this one thing go my way. Let me not have to do this again tomorrow. You have been asking so continuously and for so long that you no longer experience it as an action. It is not something you do. It is the weather you live in. And it is worth knowing who was in that room, because it was not a room full of mystics. Los Angeles, in 1948, was a city of people who had just come back from something. Rationing had ended the year before. The men were home, or had not come home. And either way, the arrangement everyone had lived under for 4 years was gone, and nothing had replaced it. There were more people arriving every week than there were places for them to live. Aerospace money was coming in. The studios were at their peak and about to be broken up. Everyone was being told constantly and from every direction that the future was arriving, and that there was a way to be positioned for it. So the people in those folding chairs were carrying ordinary things. A house, a husband who had come back different, a business that had not survived the war, a child who was ill, a debt. They came with wants into a room where the man at the front was about to take the wanting apart. Here is what happened to the material from that room. It was written down. The 5 nights were transcribed and printed as a small bound booklet, plain, unremarkable, titled Class Instruction, and handed to the people who had been there. That was the distribution, not a print run, a handout. He wrote other books. Those got published properly, sold in shops, reprinted. This one stayed in the folder. For decades, the most direct, most operational thing the man ever said existed, mainly as a duplicated booklet passed between people who had heard about it from someone who had a copy. Nobody banned it. That is worth being precise about, because there is an easier and more flattering story available here, and it is not true. There was no order, no seizure, no suppression, no index of forbidden books. The record shows a man who gave 5 talks and printed the notes for the people who came. Which is worse, if you think about it properly? A banned thing has enemies. A banned thing is at least being taken seriously by someone. This was simply allowed to go quiet, left in a drawer while easier material went into shop windows. And it stayed quiet for the better part of half a century. And in that time, the ordinary world got very good at the opposite of it. At the request, at the form, the application, the pitch, the appeal, the polite escalation, at an entire civilization of people who have been trained since childhood to believe that the correct response to wanting something is to ask something larger than yourself for it. 5 nights, 5 lessons, and by the end of the 5th, the people in that room had been handed something that does not make a person better at asking. It makes them stop. Chapter 2. The audience that isn't there. Start with something small, because the large version is unbearable and you will refuse it. You are in the shower. You are having an argument. It is a good argument. You are winning it. You have found the phrasing you did not find at the time, the clean one, the one that would have ended the conversation. And you are delivering it now, with the water running down your back, to a person who is not in the room, who has probably not thought about the exchange since it happened, and who will never hear the sentence you just constructed for them. You do this most days. Or you are driving, and you are explaining yourself, laying out the reasoning, why you made the decision you made, why it was not unreasonable, why anyone in your position would have done the same. Building the case calmly, competently, at 40 miles an hour, to an empty passenger seat. Or you compose a reply you will not send. You get it right. You read it twice. You delete it. Or you wake at 4 in the morning and find that the trial has already resumed without you. That one deserves its own moment, because it is the most honest version. 4 in the morning has no content of its own. Nothing happens at 4. There is no new information available at 4 that was not available at 11. And yet the case against you is heard there most nights, and it is heard in a particular register, not panic, which would at least be dramatic, but a kind of patient administrative review, item by item. The thing you said in March, the money, the person you have not called, the way your body has started behaving, the reasonable question of whether you have simply left it too late. And you answer every charge, fully, to nobody. By 6, you are tired in a way sleep does not touch. And by 9, you are in a meeting being asked whether you are all right, and you say you did not sleep well. which is true and explains nothing. Or the smaller version, the one that happens 40 times a day. You send a message. It is read. It is not answered. And in the 11 minutes that follow, you construct an entire interior account of what the silence means. Defend yourself against it. Revise the defense. And put the phone face down on the table, as though that closes the matter. None of this is madness. It is so common, it is nearly universal. And the universality is precisely what has made it invisible. But look at the shape of it, rather than the content. Because the shape is where the information is. Every one of those is addressed. You are not thinking. Thinking does not have a recipient. What you are doing is closer to testimony, a continuous, unpaid, unheard account of yourself, delivered to a listener you have never once described, never once located, and never once caught yourself inventing. Ask yourself who it is. You will not be able to answer. Not because the answer is hidden, but because there is nothing there to name. And yet the account continues, all day, every day. And it is exhausting in a way that has never shown up on any measure of what you actually did. That is the first shape of the fracture. Not a broken mind, a mind that has split itself into a speaker and a listener, and then lost the listener, and then kept speaking. Now widen out, because the same shape is built into everything around you. Consider what you moved through today. A form, a cue, a menu of options, none of which described your situation, a hold tone, a password reset that failed and offered no reason, a message that was read and not answered, a machine that thanked you, a page of terms you agreed to without reading because reading them was not a genuine option, a voice trained to sound like it was sorry. Every single one of those interfaces is built to receive a request. Not one of them is built to answer. This is the gray architecture, not a conspiracy. Nobody built it on purpose and nobody is running it. It is the accumulated shape of several billion people, each individually deciding that the way to get something is to submit a request to something larger than themselves. Repeated until the request shape became the only shape available. And here is the part that matters. The part this whole production exists to say. You've been told that the fractured world is the reason you feel fractured. That the noise, the speed, the systems, the isolation, that these are the cause and you are the effect. And if the world would only slow down, you would come back together. It runs the other way. The gray architecture is not the environment your fragmentation lives in. It is your fragmentation, externalized, standardized, and rented back to you. A consciousness that experiences itself as a petitioner will build institutions that receive petitions. It cannot build anything else because it has no other template. And then it will walk into those institutions, be received rather than answered, and take that as proof that petitioning is simply what life is. The mechanism is reciprocal. That is the whole trap. You build the machine out of your own fracture, and then the machine hands you your fracture back with a reference number on it, and you read that as evidence. So the tiredness makes sense now. It was never about workload. You are tired because you have been running a continuous petition to a receiver you cannot name, through an architecture that was built to receive and never to reply. And the whole system was manufactured out of the very condition it keeps confirming. Chapter 3. The Invisible Prison. Take the act apart, not the feeling of it, the mechanics. To ask for something, 3 things have to be true at once. There has to be a thing you do not have. There has to be someone or something that has it. And there has to be a distance between you and them, or the request would be unnecessary. Every petition, however quiet, however sophisticated, however dressed up as gratitude or planning or hope, silently asserts all three. You cannot ask without asserting them. The assertion is not in the words, it is in the structure of the act. So follow it through. Every time you ask, you confirm the absence. Every time you confirm the absence, you strengthen the state of being someone who does not have it. Every time you strengthen that state, the world, which reflects state and nothing else, as the fifth night would make clear, returns you more of the same. And the return arrives as evidence, and evidence is distressing, and distress produces the next petition. That is not a bad habit. It is a closed circuit. This is the invisible prison, and the reason it has held you is that the door has always been on the inside of the act you were performing to get out. You cannot pray your way out of it if praying means petitioning. You cannot plan your way out if planning means bargaining with a future that owes you nothing. You cannot even want your way out with more intensity, because intensity is the one variable that makes it worse. A stronger request is a stronger assertion of the distance. The harder you ask, the further away you put it, which explains something you have never been able to explain. The things that came easily were the things you did not want very much. You have noticed this. You have probably filed it under luck, or under irony, or under some private theory about how life enjoys withholding. But it is not irony. It is mechanism. Those things arrived without resistance because you were not standing at a distance from them, filing requests. You simply assumed them, the way you assume there will be a floor when you swing your legs out of bed. You never asked for the floor, so the floor was always there. Run that against your own record, and it holds with unpleasant consistency. The job you were not especially invested in, the one you applied for on a Tuesday out of mild curiosity, went to the interview underprepared, and got. The friendship that formed without any effort at all. The thing you mentioned once and forgot about, and which turned up 18 months later, unbidden. And then set that against the list of things you wanted properly. The ones you researched, the ones you made plans around, the ones you thought about on the drive, and before sleep, and in the shower, with real intensity for years. Almost none of those arrived. And the ones that did arrived late, and in a compromised form, and cost more than they were worth. You have probably explained this to yourself as bad luck, or as some private theory about the universe enjoying withholding, or as evidence that you are simply not one of the people things happen for. It is none of those. It is the mechanism running exactly as described. The intensity was not fuel. The intensity was the distance expressed as feeling. Before this goes any further, take something you can actually check, not a promise. A test. Within the next 2 days, you will catch yourself mid-sentence in an internal complaint. It will be an ordinary one. Something about the traffic, or your back, or somebody's tone in a message. And for about a second, you will notice that the complaint is addressed, that it has a recipient, that you are telling someone. You will not be able to say who. That is the point. The noticing will last less than a second, and then the complaint will carry on without you. That is the first thing that has changed. Not that you stopped. You will not stop, and you should not try. And trying is the mistake this entire recording is built to remove. What changed is that a process which has run underneath you, unobserved, for most of your adult life, became briefly visible from the outside. You cannot unnotice it. That single second is the whole of your progress at this stage, and it is enough. And if you get nothing else from the next hour, you will still have that. Now the objection because it has been forming since the second chapter, and it deserves an answer before it hardens. You have tried this. Some version of it. You have watched your thoughts. You have caught the negative one and replaced it. You have kept the journal, run the audit, noticed the pattern, named the pattern, sat with the pattern. You have done the work in the exact sense that phrase is used, and you have done it seriously. And here you are in a parked car at 11 at night. So it is reasonable to expect this to fail too. Here is why it did not work. And the answer is not that you did it wrong. Every one of those techniques was performed by the fractured unit. The mind monitored the mind. The speaker audited the listener. You took a consciousness that had already split itself into a petitioner and an absent recipient, and you gave it a new job, surveillance, which requires exactly the same split to function. You did not heal the fracture. You promoted it. You gave it a clipboard. And this is where the material from that room departs from every technique you have been handed since. It does not ask you to monitor the mind. It does not ask you to correct the mind, discipline the mind, purify the mind, or forgive the mind. It makes no attempt to improve the petitioner at all. It relocates you out of the mind entirely, to a position from which the mind is no longer the thing doing the operating. 5 lessons, 5 nights. The first one takes away the ground you have been standing on. Chapter 4, The Ground and the Hardening. Here is what was in the booklet. 5 lessons in a fixed order, and the order is not decorative. Each one removes something the previous one made unnecessary. Consciousness is the only reality. Assumptions harden into fact. Thinking fourth-dimensionally. No one to change but self. Remain faithful to your idea. That is the whole of it. 5 phrases, delivered over 5 nights, to 200 people in folding chairs, and then printed and left in a drawer. Take them in order. They will not work in any other. Component 1. The only ground consciousness is the only reality. Start with the ordinary version, because the extraordinary version is unusable. Look at your situation. The actual one, the number in the account, the state of the relationship, the thing in the diagnosis, the job that is taking more from you each month than it returns. Every instinct you have treats that situation as information, as a report on how things are, as a source you consult before you decide what is possible. The first lesson says, it is not a source, it is an outcome. It has no more originating power than the shape on the wall has over the hand in front of the lamp. This is the shadow, not an illusion. Nobody is telling you the dead is imaginary or that the diagnosis is not real. A shadow is entirely real. It has edges you can measure, and it will still be there tomorrow. It simply does not originate anything, and it cannot be changed at the wall. So the operation for this component is not to change anything. It is to look in the correct direction once, deliberately, which you may never have done in your life. Not, what do I want? That question is worn smooth. You have answered it so many times, the answer has stopped meaning anything. The question is, what am I currently conscious of being? Not aspiring to be, not trying to be. What state are you occupying right now so continuously that it does not register as a position at all? The way you do not register the temperature of a room you have been sitting in for an hour. The answers are unglamorous. That is how you know you have found them. I am behind. I am the one who handles it. I am not the kind of person things go well for. I am tired. I am waiting for the other thing to happen. I am someone who has to be careful. Say the true one out loud. Nobody is listening. You will find it takes about 4 seconds and that you knew it before you started. There will be resistance to this, and it is worth naming so it does not stop you. The resistance sounds like, but that is just realistic. I am behind. That is not a state, that is a fact. And pretending otherwise is exactly the kind of thinking that got people into trouble. Look carefully at what is happening in that objection. You are not defending the accuracy of the observation. You are defending your right to keep occupying it. Those are different things. And the second one is the tell. Because nobody defends a position they are merely passing through. The observation may be entirely accurate. You may in fact be behind by any measure anyone cares to apply. What the first lesson disputes is not the measurement. It is the residence. There is a difference between reading the number and living inside it, and you have not made that distinction in years, possibly ever. Note also how quickly the objection arrived. That speed is information. Assumptions that have hardened defend themselves faster than thought, because there is no thought involved. The defense is structural, the way a building resists having its foundation questioned. That state is the ground. Everything standing in your life is standing on it. And you have spent years trying to move the furniture while never once looking at the floor. Component 2. The hardening assumptions harden into fact now. The mechanism. This is the one that turns the first lesson from a philosophy into an instrument. An assumption is not a belief. It is not a hope, not an affirmation, not a thing you tell yourself in the mirror with your jaw set. All of those are attempts, and an attempt is evidence that the thing has not happened. An assumption is what you have stopped checking. That is the whole definition. And it is worth stopping on because it is the most operationally useful sentence in the entire 1948 material. You are not looking for something you believe hard. You are looking for something you have quietly stopped auditing. You assume the light will come on. You do not affirm it. You do not visualize it. You do not ask the ceiling. You flick the switch already walking into the room, and the whole of your body has committed to the outcome before the circuit has closed. That is the posture. That exactly, and not 1 degree more intense. And the reason this matters is that it is already running. You are not being asked to acquire the ability to assume. You have been assuming continuously since you were a child, at industrial scale, without pause. The assumptions currently hardened in you have already produced most of what you are looking at. So the operation is retrieval, not construction. Find one. One assumption you have stopped checking that is producing evidence right now. Money is the easiest place to look because the returns are fast and countable. But use whatever is loudest. Something along the lines of, money leaves faster than it arrives. That is not a fear. You're not anxious about it. You have simply stopped questioning it, which is why you round down when you estimate, and why you brace slightly before you open the app, and why a good month reads to you as an anomaly rather than as data. That assumption has hardened, and it is doing exactly what the second lesson says it will do. Not by magic, but through 10,000 micro-decisions a year that you never experienced as decisions. You did not send the invoice for 4 days. You quoted low. You took the safer contract. You did not ask about the rate. You bought the cheaper one that failed in 8 months and had to be bought again. You did not go to the thing where the person you needed to meet was going to be because of the train fare, and the train fare was £11. Not one of those felt like a belief operating. Each one felt like sensible behavior in the circumstances. That is what a hardened assumption looks like from the inside. It does not appear as a thought. It appears as the circumstances. And this is the point at which the second lesson stops being interesting and becomes uncomfortable, because it cuts the other way as well. If the assumption produced the evidence, then the evidence was never the reason. You have been treating your situation as the justification for the state you are in. It is the other way around, and it has been the other way around for as long as you have been running it. And the loop is now old enough that you cannot remember which end you started from. You do not need to remember. You only need to know which end you are standing on now. Which brings the problem into focus, and it is not the problem you thought you had. You do not have a wanting problem. Your wanting has been immaculate for years. You have wanted with a precision and a persistence that would have built a cathedral. You have a residence problem. You have been living in one state while requesting another. And the state you live in is the one that hardens, because it is the one you have stopped checking. This is the old man, the state you are still wearing while trying to walk out of it. And you cannot petition your way out of a coat. You take it off. The third lesson is how. Chapter 5, The Fixed Point. The third lesson was called Thinking Fourth Dimensionally, and the name has done it enormous damage. It sounds like physics. It is not physics. Strip the vocabulary of its period, and what is left is a single distinction. And the distinction is the most practically useful thing in the whole booklet. There are two positions available to you at any moment. You can think of a thing, or you can think from it. Thinking of something means holding it at a distance and examining it. There is a screen, and you are in the seat. The thing you want is over there, rendered in detail, well lit, and you are here, watching it. And the entire arrangement is an unbroken statement that you are not in it. You have done this for years and called it visualizing, and it has produced almost nothing, and you concluded you were bad at visualizing. You were not. You were excellent at it. You were simply doing it from the seat. Thinking from something means occupying it. There is no screen. There is no distance. The event is not being viewed. It is being had. Your hands are in it. This is the fixed point, a position rather than a technique. And once you are standing on it, the mind stops being the thing doing the work, which is the entire promise of the fifth night. Now the operation itself. This is the most concrete thing in the recording. Take it in order. 1. Define the end. Not the process, not the route, not the version with contingencies attached. The end, the state of affairs after the thing has already happened and stopped being news. Most people cannot do this. They define a wish, which is the end, with the wanting still attached to it. And the wanting is the tell. If it still feels like wanting, you have not found the end. You have found a better lit version of the distance. 2. Construct the event that implies it. This is where the material becomes surgical. You do not imagine the outcome. You imagine a small, ordinary, entirely undramatic event that would only be occurring if the outcome were already a fact. Not the money in the account. The unremarkable moment of paying for something and not doing the arithmetic first. Not the recovery. The specific gesture of putting the thing back in the cupboard because you no longer need it out on the counter. Not the new work. Somebody asking you a routine question about it, and you answering, bored, small, domestic, implying. And the action of the self must be predominant. You are doing something, not receiving congratulations. Congratulations is another form of being spoken to, and you already have quite enough of that. 2 errors will present themselves here, and both feel like diligence. The first is scale. You will reach for the large moment, the announcement, the keys, the scan result, the room turning to look at you. Large moments are the worst possible material, because they are exactly the moments a person imagines when they do not have the thing. A mind that does not have it dreams of the arrival. A mind that has it does not think about the arrival at all. It thinks about Tuesday. The second is route. You will find yourself constructing the sequence, how it comes, who calls, which door opens, what has to happen first. Stop. That is the petitioner returning in the costume of a planner. You are not required to know the route, and you are not competent to design it. And every minute spent on the mechanism is a minute spent asserting that the mechanism is in doubt. Define the end. Build one small event that could only be happening afterwards. Leave the middle alone entirely. 3. Immobilize the body and go to the threshold. Lie down or sit back. Stop moving, genuinely stop, to the point where a shift in position would require a decision. Then induce the state on the edge of sleep. Drowsy, heavy, the point at which the body has already begun to let go, but where you can still direct where your attention goes. The condition Neville described as being attentive without effort. The reason for this is not mystical, and it is not decorative. It is that at this threshold, the effort drops out. And effort is the contaminant. Effort is the residue of asking. You can hold an assumption at the edge of sleep in a way you simply cannot hold it at 11 in the morning with your jaw clenched. Because at the threshold, there is not enough of you left awake to argue with it. 4. Enter the action. Do not observe it. Put your hand into the event. If there is someone in it, take their hand and feel it as solid. If there is a surface, feel the temperature of it. Carry on the conversation from inside the scene, not about it. His own example was a handshake, and it is still the best one available, because it is almost impossible to do wrongly. Imagine someone standing in front of you. Put your hand into theirs. Do not look at the two hands from outside. Feel the hand, its temperature, whether it is dry, the specific pressure of the grip, and the fact that it is slightly firmer than you expected. Feel your own hand meeting it. That is the entire distinction, contained in one gesture. You cannot feel a hand you are watching. The moment the sensation is real, you are no longer in the seat, and you did not get there by concentrating harder. You got there by touching something. So build the sensation first, before anything else in the scene. The conversation can be vague. The room can be unspecified. But something must be solid in your hands, because solidity is the only thing that reliably relocates you. The test is simple and unforgiving. If you can see yourself, you are still in the seat. 5. Make elsewhere here and the future now. That phrase is his, and it is the entire instruction compressed. You are not traveling to the scene. You are not scheduling it. You are collapsing the distance in both dimensions at once, space and time, until there is no gap left for a request to cross. And then you sleep, holding it, not concluding it, not sealing it, not saying amen. You just stop, still inside it. This is operant power, and the phrase is worth defining precisely because it names the only real distinction in this entire body of work. An imagination that watches is a faculty of entertainment. It is what you use at the cinema and in the shower argument and at 4 in the morning during the trial. It costs you energy and returns nothing, and you have been running it at full capacity your whole life. An imagination that acts is something else, not stronger, not more vivid, positioned differently, inside the event rather than in front of it. The difference between those two is not a matter of degree. It is the difference between the person watching the shadow on the wall and the person who noticed there was a hand. And when you have been standing at the fixed point for even a short while, something starts to go wrong with your ordinary machinery. You reach for the request, and it will not go. Chapter 6. The Severed Petition, Component 4. No one to change but self. The fourth lesson has the plainest title of the 5, and it is the one that does the damage. No one to change but self. Read casually. It sounds like a piece of ordinary self-improvement counsel. Take responsibility, stop blaming, work on yourself. It has been read that way for 70 years, and the reading is not merely shallow. It is the opposite of what the sentence says. It is not moral advice. It is a description of the available surface area. There is nothing else to operate on. Not because operating on other things would be wrong, but because there is no other thing there. The people, the institutions, the circumstances, the balance, the diagnosis, all of it is shadow. Cast. You have been reaching past the only lever in the room to grab at shapes on a wall for years and finding them insubstantial and concluding that you were weak. Now put that together with what you already know, because the two pieces fit, and the fit is the whole production. Asking requires a receiver. Lesson 4 says there is no receiver. Not that the receiver is unwilling. Not that the receiver is busy, or testing you, or waiting for you to prove your worthiness, or working in mysterious ways. There is no address. The petition you have been filing continuously since childhood has been going out to a location that does not exist, which is precisely why every reply you ever got came back sounding exactly like your own voice. And here is the consequence, which is the reason this recording is called what it is called. The energy you have been spending on the asking was never being received by anything. It was being spent entirely on maintaining the distance the asking asserts. That is all it ever did. It was not traveling anywhere. It was holding the gap open. So when you stop, the gap closes. Not because you were rewarded for stopping. Because the thing propping it open was the asking. Everything obeys the moment you stop asking for it. Not as a reward. Not as a spiritual transaction in which surrender is the price and receipt is the payment. That is petitioning with better manners. And it fails for the same reason everything else failed. It is mechanical. The request was the obstruction. Remove the obstruction, and what was always adjacent to you stops being held at arm's length by the one arm holding it there. And this reframes something you have carried for a long time, possibly since childhood, which deserves to be set down properly. You have wondered, at some point, whether you were being ignored, whether the requests went out and were assessed and declined, whether there was a judgment being made about you somewhere, that you had not earned it, or not suffered enough for it, or had asked in the wrong manner, or were simply not the kind of person these things are given to. That question has no answer because it has no subject. Nothing declined you. Nothing assessed you. There was no tribunal, no ledger, no quiet decision made about your worthiness in a room you were not admitted to. The silence you have been interpreting as refusal for most of your life was never refusal. It was the sound of an empty address. The second checkable thing will happen within a week or two, and it will not feel good. The step reflex will fire and it will fail to complete. Something will go wrong, a small thing, a bill, a delay, a message that reads badly. And you will feel the old machinery start up. The petition will begin to form. And then it will arrive at the place where the recipient used to be and find nothing there and stop. There will be a short silence in you where the plea used to be. It will not feel like peace. It will feel like a missing stair, like reaching for a banister that has been taken away while you were out. there may be a second of something close to panic, because that petition has been your response to difficulty for your entire life. And you have never once been in a difficult moment without it. Stay in the silence. Do not fill it. That silence is the fixed point holding under load, and it is worth more than any outward sign you could have been given at this stage. Component 5. The delayed echo remain faithful to your idea, which brings the fifth night to its last instruction, and to the place where every operator in that room would have been most likely to fail. You will assume the state, and then nothing will happen. Not for a day, possibly not for weeks. The account will not move. The person will not call. The symptom will not shift. And you will be standing there in a new state with the old world still fully assembled around you, looking exactly as it did before. This interval is the void. It is the only genuinely difficult part of the entire protocol, and it is where almost everyone turns back. Because the void is not empty, it is full of a single, reasonable, corrosive question. Is this working? And you must understand what that question actually is. Checking is asking. It has a different grammar and the same structure. It asserts that you do not have it, that something else knows whether you will, and that there is a distance across which news must travel. Every time you check, you rebuild the gap you just closed, and then you close it again, and then you check. That is not faith wavering. That is a circuit you have re-energized with your own hands. And checking is rarely obvious, which is why it survives. It almost never announces itself as doubt. It arrives wearing competence. You look at the balance, not anxiously, just to stay informed. You reread the message thread to assess where things stand. You search for the symptom again, in slightly different words, to see whether the results have changed since Tuesday. You mention the situation to a friend, framed as an update, and watch their face for a reading. You revisit the plan. You count how many days it has been. Every one of those is the petition, resumed. And each one is defensible in isolation, which is precisely the problem. You will never catch yourself doing something indefensible. You will catch yourself being sensible 40 times a week, and each instance will quietly rebuild the distance. So the instruction here is not to believe harder. Believing harder is more effort, and effort is the contaminant. The instruction is to stop taking readings. So remain faithful, which in operational terms means one thing only. Stop consulting the shadow for news about the source. The interval is not the absence of the result. The interval is the result in transit, the gap between the sound and the return of the sound. That is the delayed echo. And every operator who ever gave up did so during it, on the reasonable grounds that they could not hear anything yet. Chapter 7. The operation. Everything so far has been clean because it has been abstract. Now put it under load in the two places where it is hardest to hold and where the objections are strongest. The objections are good ones. They deserve answering properly rather than being talked past. This is denial. Debt. The number exists. Say that first and say it plainly, because there is an entire industry built on encouraging people not to look at the number, and this material has nothing to do with it. You know the number. You know it to the pound. You know which day of the month it becomes real, and you know the specific weight in the chest that arrives the night before. And you know the small physical habits it has built in you. The pause before the app opens, the rounding down, the way you have started reading certain envelopes in the hall rather than carrying them to the table. None of that is being denied here. It is being reclassified. The operator opens the letter. That is the distinction, and it is the entire answer to the objection. Denial does not open the letter. Denial leaves it in the hall for 3 weeks and constructs an elaborate internal narrative about why the situation is fine. Denial is a petitioner in hiding. You open it, you read it, you do the arithmetic, you make the call and arrange the plan and pay what can be paid, and you do all of it competently. Because the third dimension has consequences, and being clever about consciousness does not exempt anyone from them. What changes is what you do with the information afterwards. Because until now, that number has been doing a second job. It has not merely been telling you what you owe. It has been telling you who you are. It has been the ground, the thing you are conscious of being. And every plan you have made, every opportunity you have assessed, every quiet decision not to ask for more, has been made by someone standing on it. The operation is to strip it of that second job. The number keeps its first job entirely. It loses the second one completely. Look at what the second job has actually been costing, because it is far more than the debt. You did not apply for the thing you were qualified for, because the timing was wrong. And the timing was wrong because of the number. You stayed 11 months longer than you should have, because leaving would have been irresponsible. And irresponsible was defined by the number. You did not take the training. You did not go to the funeral in another country. You have a specific and detailed knowledge of what everything costs, and almost no knowledge of what anything is worth. And you have been calling all of that prudence. Some of it was. That is what makes this difficult. A hardened assumption does not produce obviously foolish behavior. It produces defensible behavior endlessly, which is why it never gets audited. Every one of those decisions could be justified at the time by a reasonable person looking at the same figures. But a reasonable person looking at the same figures from a different ground would have made perhaps 3 of them differently. And 3 is a life. That is what is being recovered here. Not the balance, the decisions. And there is a specific relief available at this point that nobody mentions, so it should be said plainly. Money handled from the petition state is exhausting in a way that has nothing to do with the amount. It is exhausting because every transaction is a small negotiation with an absent authority about whether you are permitted. People with far less than you standing somewhere else do not experience this, and you have probably met one and found them baffling. And you will know whether you have actually done this because there is a physical test. The next time you pay for something ordinary, coffee, fuel, a bag of shopping, watch for the arithmetic, the small automatic subtraction that runs before the card touches the reader. When that subtraction stops happening on its own, without you suppressing it, you have moved. Not because the balance changed, because the person doing the paying is standing somewhere else. This is dangerous. Illness. Now the hardest one. And it will be handled narrowly, because the alternative is the kind of overreach that has caused genuine harm in this field, and this production will not participate in it. Be direct about what is not being said. Nothing in the 1948 material is a treatment. Nothing here replaces medicine, and no one in that room was told to stop seeing a doctor. If you are ill, you are under care, and you stay under care. You take what you are prescribed. You attend the appointment. You tell the truth to the person examining you, including the parts that are frightening. That is not a disclaimer bolted onto the front of a metaphysical claim. It is the operating condition. An operator who abandons treatment has not applied this material. They have petitioned it, which is the one thing it does not do. So what is left if the treatment is untouched? the state you occupy while it proceeds, which is not nothing. It is most of the experience. Because illness does something specific to consciousness, and this is where the material has something real to offer. It converts a person into a full-time petitioner. The whole architecture of it, the waiting, the results, the appointments, the sense that the important information is somewhere else, held by someone else, arriving on a schedule you do not set, installs the petition posture more completely than almost any other circumstance in a life. You become someone waiting to be told, and you know the texture of it if you have been there. The calendar reorganized around dates you did not choose. The letter that arrives with an appointment on it and no other information. The 9 days between the test and the result, which are not 9 days, but 1 day experienced 9 times. The way you begin to describe yourself to people by your stage or your numbers, and how quickly that becomes the first fact about you rather than the fourth. The way you stop finishing sentences about next year. That is the petition posture, installed comprehensively by circumstances that would install it in anyone. There is no failure of character in it. It is what the situation does. And the cost of it is not spiritual. It is practical, and it is measurable. And it is why this matters at all. A person who is entirely a petitioner does not ask the second question in the appointment. They accept the first answer, because asking again feels like presumption toward the person who holds the information. They do not mention the new symptom, because it seems minor and the clinician is busy. They do not seek the second opinion. They do not say that the side effect is intolerable, because the alternative might be worse, and they have not been invited to have a view. They hand over the treatment, which is correct, and then hand over everything else, which is not. The operator in this situation is not calmer or braver or more enlightened. They are simply still present as a party to their own case. They ask the second question. They report the thing they nearly did not mention. They occupy, at night, at the threshold, the specific ordinary state of a person for whom this is being dealt with. Not the moment of the good result, which is a large moment and therefore useless, but something small and afterwards. Putting the folder in a drawer, booking something for August. That is the whole of it. It is narrower than what you have been offered elsewhere. And that state has consequences of its own, not because thinking cures anything, because a person who is entirely a petitioner stops making decisions, stops asking questions in the appointment, stops noticing what they actually feel, defers everything, and hands over not just the treatment, but the whole of themselves. The operation is narrow, and it is real. You occupy the state of the person for whom this is being handled, including the version where it is handled by the people handling it, rather than the state of the person waiting to hear. That is all. It is smaller than what you have been promised elsewhere. It is also true, which the promises are not. And there is one more thing to say here, because it matters more than the technique. If you are unwell and you have been carrying, somewhere underneath this, the idea that you caused it, that some failure of thought or feeling on your part built the thing that is now in your body. Put that down. That belief is not in the 1948 material. It is a later distortion, and it has done more damage to more people than any doctrine in this field. Nobody assumed their way into illness. You are not being punished by your own mind. The operator under illness is not the one who refuses the diagnosis. They are the one who receives it, acts on it entirely, and declines to become it. Chapter 8. The limit. This is cruel. grief. Here, the protocol stops. Not because grief is too difficult or too sacred, or because a gentler tone is required for a sensitive subject. It stops because grief is not the condition this material addresses, and applying it there would be a category error committed against someone in no state to catch it. Go back to the diagnosis in the second chapter. The fracture was a consciousness split into a speaker and a listener, addressing a recipient who was never there. Grief is not that. Grief is intact consciousness under load. The person you are speaking to was real. They were there. The address had a destination, and the destination has been removed. And what you are experiencing is the entirely accurate registration of an actual absence. There is nothing to correct. Nothing has malfunctioned. You are not fractured. You are a whole instrument reading a true measurement. And the measurement is unbearable because the thing it measures was that large. So there is no operation offered here. And if you came to this recording carrying a loss and hoping for a technique, that hope is being declined rather than exploited. You do not assume your way out of it. You do not revise it. You do not treat the person as shadow, and anyone who tells you to is selling something and has not understood a word of the fifth night. You carry it, badly, for a long time, in a manner that has no method and no timeline and no checkable marker. And the only thing worth saying about it is that the carrying does eventually change shape. One thing only, and it is offered as company rather than as instruction. The internal address continues after a death, and people frightened by that describe it as a symptom. It is not. You will keep telling them things. You will see something they would have found funny and compose the sentence before you remember. You will argue with them. You will apologize to them at 4 a.m. for something that happened in 2011. Nothing has gone wrong with you. That channel was open for decades, and channels do not close on the day the news arrives. Do not apply anything to it. Do not correct it, and do not let anyone tell you to. It is the last working part of a relationship that was real, and it will quieten on its own schedule, which is not yours and not anyone's, and which owes you no account of itself. The material has edges. This is one of them. A body of work that claims to apply everywhere applies nowhere. And the fact that this one declines a case is the strongest evidence you have that it is not merely telling you what you want to hear. Nothing is happening. The job, which leaves the most common failure and the least dramatic, and the one that will actually take you out. The job that is eating you. Not a crisis. That is the problem with it. A crisis would at least be an event. This is the slow one, the meetings, the diminishing returns, the Sunday evening that starts at 4 p.m, the specific gray feeling of a corridor you have walked 10,000 times, the growing awareness that you are exchanging the only irreplaceable thing you own for a number that does not cover what it costs you. You will apply this material to that situation, and you will come back in 3 weeks and report that nothing is happening. Here is what is actually occurring when a person says that. They are standing in front of the shadow, asking it for confirmation from a position that is still entirely petitionary, and then treating its refusal to answer as a verdict on the assumption. Watch the sequence. You assume the state at night, properly at the threshold, from inside the event. You sleep, you wake. And by 9 a.m, you are in the corridor scanning for evidence, and the corridor is exactly as it was yesterday. And something in you concludes, it did not take. The assumption did not fail. It was withdrawn in the corridor at 9 by a person who went looking for it in a place it does not live. And there is a further thing here that almost nobody is told, and it is the reason the job case is the one that catches people. The change, when it comes, will not look like an event. You are watching for the offer, the message, the door. What actually happens first is smaller and easier to miss, and it happens inside you. You stop rehearsing. The commute conversation with your manager, the one you have been running for months, the one where you finally say it, that stops running. Not because you resolve to stop. You simply arrive one day and notice the journey was quiet. The Sunday evening thing arrives at 6 instead of 4. Then not at all. A request comes in that would previously have cost you the whole afternoon in resentment, and you deal with it in 9 minutes and think nothing of it. You stop checking whether the thing you sent was received well. You say no to something without constructing the justification first. And then, later, weeks later, in some cases months, the outer thing moves. Somebody mentions an opening. A conversation goes somewhere it has never gone before. A piece of work you did 18 months ago is remembered by someone you had forgotten met you. Every one of those will look like coincidence. And here is the difficulty with the whole subject. It will always look like coincidence. There is no version of this where the mechanism becomes visible. You will never catch it working. You will only ever notice, considerably afterwards, that the run of luck began at roughly the point you stopped rehearsing on the drive. None of that will feel like manifestation. It will feel like you were slightly less bothered that week. And it is, in fact, the entire mechanism operating exactly as the second lesson describes. An assumption hardening, expressing first as a change in what you no longer check, and only afterwards as a change in what is in front of you. The operator's error is almost never the assumption. It is going out to the corridor at 9 to see whether it worked. Chapter 9. The Architect. Go back to the room. Los Angeles, 1948. The fifth night. Folding chairs, 2 warm bulbs, mimeograph ink, 200 people who have come back 4 times and are about to go home for the last time. Understand what those people were walking out with. Not a method for getting things. They could have got that anywhere in that city in 1948 or any year since, and most of them had probably tried. The street outside was already full of it. They were walking out with the loss of an addressee. 4 nights had taken the ground out from under them, the reality of the outer world, then the mechanism that builds it, then the position from which it is built, then the fact that there was no one out there to petition. And on the 5th night, they were told the only thing left to tell them, which was to hold. Remain faithful to your idea. That is not encouragement. That is the last instruction to a person who has just had every exit removed except one. And then they went home. That is the part of this that stays with you once you know it. There was no community afterwards, no membership, no follow-up course, no structure to belong to. 200 people picked up their coats and walked out into a Los Angeles evening and went back to the debt, the illness, the marriage, the work, carrying a booklet and no supervision whatsoever. Most of them, statistically, did nothing with it. That is what happens to material like this, and it is not a tragedy, it is arithmetic. But some of them held, and the ones who held did so with no evidence, no confirmation, and nobody to ask. Which was the point, and which was the only condition under which the thing could have worked at all. You are in the same position they were. You have the same material, the same absence of supervision, and the same complete lack of anyone to report to. That is not a deficiency in the delivery. That is the delivery. The third checkable thing will take longer than the others, and it is the strangest. Something you asked for a long time ago will arrive. Not the thing you are working on now. Something older. A request you filed years back and then largely stopped thinking about. It will turn up more or less intact, more or less as specified, and it will land flat. Not disappointing, flat. You will hold it and find that the appropriate feeling is not available, and you will wonder briefly whether something in you has broken. Nothing has broken. The person who filed that request no longer exists. They were a state, and you have left the state, and the thing arrived addressed to a resident who has moved out. That flatness is the delayed echo returning, the sound of an assumption you were holding so long ago that you had stopped listening for it. And it is the last confirmation you will need, because it proves the interval was never empty. It was only long. And now the thing, the whole of this, has been walking toward, which was never a technique at all. You have been treating this as a law, something external, discovered rather than invented, which you have been learning to operate the way you might learn to operate a lathe. Carefully, correctly, hoping to avoid injury. That framing survives until roughly here, and then it comes apart. Because a law requires a legislator, and by now you have run out of places to put one. There is no receiver. There is no legislator. There is no architecture out there issuing outcomes according to rules you are trying to satisfy. The thing you were petitioning and the thing doing the petitioning were the same faculty, in the same skull, separated by nothing but the act of asking. This is what Neville actually taught, underneath all of it, and what the 5 lessons were built to deliver a person to rather than announce at the start. He said it plainly enough once people had walked the road to it. The human imagination is God. Not a metaphor about potential, not encouragement dressed as theology. A statement about identity, that the faculty in you which constructs, occupies, and holds a state is not a tool you use to contact something greater. It is the thing itself, operating at low power in a body, having spent decades convinced it was a supplicant. That is the awakening God, not a deity waking up in the sky. A faculty coming to, slowly, awkwardly, in a parked car at 11 at night, and discovering that the address it has been sending everything to was its own. And notice that this is the end of the road rather than the start of it, which is the whole reason the 5 lessons were given in that order. Told at the beginning, it is worthless. Worse than worthless, it is the kind of statement that produces either dismissal or something considerably more dangerous. A person who has been handed a conclusion without the 4 removals that make it survivable. That is where the field goes wrong. It leads with the identity and skips the dismantling. And what it produces is not an operator, but a petitioner who has decided they are God and is still, underneath it, asking. The order protects you. Ground, mechanism, position, severance, and only then the identity, them arriving not as a claim you have to defend, but as the last remaining explanation once everything else has been taken away. You do not have to believe it. You will not believe it on a first hearing, and you should not. You only have to stop asking and then observe what is left standing. You did not find a way to make the world obey. You stopped asking and discovered you were the architect, and the architect does not petition the building. 5 nights in a rented room in 1948. Printed as a booklet and left in a drawer. Nobody took it from you. It was simply never handed over. It has been handed over now. Everything in those 5 lessons compresses to a single position, and that position has a name, and the card carrying it is at mindhavenaudio.cloud. It is called the fixed point. Stand on
If
it.
you are still here, it means you recognize the petition you've been running. You felt the missing stair. What Neville did in 1948 wasn't about giving people a new religion. It was about handing them back their own mechanics. And that is exactly what we are doing here. I know a lot of you have been carrying the weight of asking, hoping, and waiting for a very long time. I want you to try the protocol tonight. Find the end, build the event, and stand on the fixed point. If this script shifted something for you, I've put the exact card carrying this position over at mindhavenaudio.cloud. It's called the fixed point. Go look at it. Stop petitioning the building and realize you are the architect. Leave a comment below if you caught yourself running the internal argument today. I read them all. I'll see you in the next one.